This is Trial Transcripts Exposed by Crime in Court with Heather. Raw courtroom reads with my commentary. Let's dive in. Hi everyone, welcome back to Crime in Court with Heather. This is Trial Transcripts Exposed. We are reading through the Delphi case and we are almost complete. We have, in the last episode, the state just rested. They recalled a couple people who was on the stand. Stacey Eldridge was on the stand discussing the cell phone data, the bombshell cell phone data that someone was handling Abby's phone, plugging things in and out of it at times when, did I say Abby? I meant to say Libby if I said Abby. It's Libby's phone. And he found that somebody, or she, I'm sorry, Stacey Eldridge found that somebody was interacting with Libby's phone, plugging things into the auxiliary cord jack or the headphone jack and whatever. So she found that out. Then this, for whatever reason, the defense recalled Christopher Cecil and Brian Bunner and on their at the end of their case in chief, and then they ended on those two who basically said we did a Google search and it could have been dirt or water that got into the phone, but nobody looked for dirt or water, and that was not a scientifically backed opinion. That was a Google search, so it shouldn't have even come into trial, but there we have it. So that's how we ended the defense's case. Now we're going to move on to the state's rebuttal today. We have 3 witnesses that are recalled. I'm drawing a blank on one of them. Breann Wilber, who was an eyewitness, she was at the bridge that day. Brian Harshman, who went through, I believe he went through all the audio of Richard Allen, and he might have even interviewed Richard Allen in the beginning. And then Dr. Martin. Okay, sorry. I had to check on that. Usually I do this before an episode, but I forgot. So Dr. John Martin, he is not a recalled witness. He is actually just a rebuttal witness that the state is calling to basically counter the mental health claims that, the defense is saying that Richard Allen was in a state of psychosis and all of that. They're going to counter that with the Westville Correctional Facility's psychiatrist, Dr. John Martin. So that's who's going to be testifying. And Brian Harshman was the guy who did watch and listen to 700 prison calls, and he watched all the videos and things. And he's going to testify to what great conditions Richard Allen had. It's really not a lot. And you'll see that it's kind of like, it's a dumb point to even bring up. So that's who we're going to hear from today. So I just wanted to give you guys the heads up there. We're going to start from where I left off last time. So they went off the record after the last witness and after the defense rested, and now they're about to go into a sidebar, and we're going to hear that sidebar. So Mr. Rosie says, we were up talking with the staff, and they told us when we broke out with the instructions, they were still fully 40 more minutes out or so. The court says, well, we were just told 5. Are your folks here? Yep, says Mr. McLeland. The court says, oh. Mr. McLeland says, we've got everybody here. The court says, okay. Mr. McLeland says, but we can wait however long. Mr. Rosie says, so I told the jailers, so they took Mr. Allen downstairs. Mr. Rosie said that. The court says, oh, all right. Mr. Rosie says, and Mr. Baldwin ran back to Logansport to get some notes. Mr. McLeland says, everybody's here. Rosie says, I mean, that's what we were told. I was listening to I'm not saying anybody misinterpreted anything, but I talked to Trooper Holman, and that's what he told me. So the court says, okay, well, what did he tell him? Mr. Rosie says, so I don't know what else to do. McLeland says, I did tell him about a half hour, but we got everybody here. So I talked to Mr. Rosie and we've got our witnesses here. We can go wherever. Mr. Rosie says, well, I'm just I mean, it's not going to be hard to get Rick back up here, obviously. The court says, oh, right. He's just downstairs. Mr. Rosie says, I just don't want him sitting in the courtroom. These guys are like, what are we doing? So I just told them what I was told. The court says, mm-hmm. Mr. Rosie says, they made their decision. So really, I have no idea what they're referring to here. Mr. McLellan says something that's inaudible. I think we're missing portions of this conversation due to maybe some later redactions on the court reporter's part, and maybe even Gull assigned her to do that. I don't know. I'm purely speculating, but I think we're missing some pieces. And I think this court reporter, I think one of the reasons it took so long to get the script out was because they were trying to take out portions of sidebars. Because the sidebars don't make a whole lot of sense sometimes. Court says, okay. Rosie says, so. Ms. Auger says, I just ran downstairs. The court says, okay. Mr. Rosie says, that's okay. Court says, all right, go call and get Mr. Allen up here. Mr. Rosie says, okay, they go off the record. Now they're back on the record. Mr. Rosie says, I'm still going to be 25 minutes before he gets here. They're hustling. I don't know what else to do. We're just trying to work within the time frames we were given. So the court says, all right, well, we can't do anything if your co-counsel's not here. So I guess we'll go off the record. Mr. Rosie says, I'm sorry, I just deal with the logistics. The court says, all right, well, so obviously she's perturbed and he can tell, and it's going to make for a great day on the bench or in the courtroom for the attorneys, rather. The court says, sorry, ladies and gentlemen, this is after the sidebar conference concludes. Sorry, ladies and gentlemen, we have no attorney here to conduct cross, so we'll have to again go off the record. Jody can go off the record. They do so. The court comes back on the record and says, all right, we are back on the record. Is the state ready with its witness? Mr. McLellan says, yes, Your Honor. Ms. Diener says, yes. The defense, ready? Says the court. Yes, says Mr. Baldwin. The court says, let's bring up the jury. All rise, says the bailiff. The jury comes in. The bailiff says, thank you. You may be seated. The court says, thank you, gentlemen. Well, welcome back, ladies and gentlemen. Mr. McLelland, you may call your first witness, your first state's rebuttal witness. And the state, Ms. Diener says, the state would call Breann Wilber. So again, she saw Bridge Guy is what she's going to testify to. Okay. So Ms. Diener asks, Ms. Wilber, please state your full name and spell your first and last name again for us. She does. And you testified previously in this trial, is that correct? Yes. And during that testimony, just to orient that for the jury, you provided some testimony as well as some Snapchat photographs of when you arrived at the High Bridge on February 13th of 2017. Is that correct? Yes. And then you also provided a Snapchat photo with a timestamp of when you had a picture on a bench as you were leaving the High Bridge Trail. Is that correct? Yes, ma'am. Did you also have a Snapchat photo from when you arrived at Freedom Bridge? Yes. And would Freedom Bridge be on the first bridge that you would come to as you traveled walking from town? Yes. If we were walking from town, we would hit Freedom Bridge first. Okay, Judge, may I approach? Says Ms. Diener. The court says you may. Ms. Wilber, I'm going to show you what's marked as State's Exhibit 318. It has 2 pages. Please look at both. Do you recognize those photographs? Yes. What do you recognize them as? I did it again. I'm sorry. It was in my mind to do it. I forgot to shrink myself. Sorry, sorry, sorry. You don't want to look at me. I don't even want to look at me. So I don't like being on camera. So I try not to be, but whatever. It is what it is. All right, so do you recognize those photographs? Yes. And what do you recognize them as? It is Freedom Bridge, a picture that I took on the day of February 13th, 2017. Ms. Diener says, Judge, the state would move to admit Exhibit 318 and publish it to the jury. State's Exhibit 318 is offered. Mr. Baldwin says, preliminary question? Yes, says the court. Baldwin asks, when did you provide this to the state? The witness says, like the first time I gave it to them, or Mr. Baldwin says, yeah. To Stacy or just in the beginning? To Stacy, that's Stacy Diener, the one who is interviewing her right now, or direct examining her. To Stacy. I'm not sure the exact date, but well, was it since your testimony? Say that again. Was it since your testimony or before then? It was before then. Okay. And do you know how much time before? Maybe the first time we talked. It was when I sent her the pictures. Okay. I don't know the exact date. I don't have any objection. The court says, all right, without objection, 318 is admitted. Mr. Rosie says, I'm sorry, what was the number? 318, says Ms. Auger and the court. Mr. Rosie says, thank you. State's exhibit is published. Nobody asked for it to be published. That's not in there. Ms. Wilber, would this be, the court says, hold on. Oh, I'm so sorry, Judge, says Ms. Diener. They're not done yet, says the court. Okay, now we may proceed. Ms. Diener asks, so this photograph indicates that you arrive at 12:25 p.m. on February 13th of 2017. Is that correct? Yes. And so this picture was in sequence with the other pictures that you provided. Is that correct? Yes. While you were walking, did you walk from Freedom Bridge towards High Bridge that day? Yes. And during that time, did you see any other young girls your age? No, I did not. Or younger? I did not. Okay, did you see any man that would resemble the picture of Bridge Guy we discussed previously? I did not. Did you see any man that would resemble the picture of Bridge Guy? She says she did not. She did not see Bridge Guy then? I'm confused. I thought she said Bridge Guy. She says no. She did not. But she saw some other girls, but not not Abby and Libby. Ms. Diener says, I have no other questions. Mr. Baldwin, says the court, and Mr. Baldwin says, thank you. Mr. Baldwin asks, that's a good memory for 7.5 years ago? My dog is like on his back, stretching. All you can see is his legs. He's getting belly rubs right now when he's half asleep. This dog is so funny, this puppy of mine. Cross-examination of Breann Wilber. Mr. Baldwin asked, that's a good memory for 7.5 years ago. Is that so? Your memory is on the day that school was out, that there was no other children on the High Bridge or on the trail? Not that I recall. Nothing. Did you see any? Nothing sticks out to me to make me want to memorize. Okay. Is that something that you would normally do, is look around and note different people and put that in your brain for later? If it gives me a reason to remember it or gives me a feeling, but if not, I won't recall. Okay. So you don't remember if there were any other kids from high school walking around the trail that time that you were there? I don't recall. Okay, no other questions. Ms. Diener, says the court. Now we have some redirect. Ms. Diener asks, Ms. Wilber, you were questioned pretty close in time to February 13th of 2017, were you not? I was. And you became aware that very same day that Libby and Abby were missing, is that correct? Yes. And so, does the events of February 13 cause that day to stick out in your mind? Yes. And did you give law enforcement a statement of what you saw that day close in time? Yes. No other questions. Mr. Baldwin asks the court. And he does have some recross. Mr. Baldwin asks, but the focus of the police was at the end of your timeline, the 2 o'clock. What time was it when you were at that bench? Without looking at the picture, I don't know the exact time. But it was later in the day, 2 p.m. or something. It would have been around there. I don't remember. Yeah, and so between Ms. Diener says, Judge, I'm going to object to him inserting a time when she just indicated that she would have to look at a picture to know what particular time because she's not quoting it accurately. The court says to Baldwin, response? I will rephrase. Court says, thank you. Whatever the evidence is about that bench photo, if it's 2 o'clock, 1 o'clock, whatever time it is, that was the focus of the police. It wasn't your interactions at the beginning of your time on the trail, was it? They asked me about that, but we focused more towards the end, and that's what sticked out to me. Right. Thank you. So they were paying attention to the end of her walk on the trails, not the beginning. So law enforcement, we're not focused on anything before 2 o'clock because that's when they say that the girls and Alan was on the trail and he took them aside. And between that time and 2:30, 3 o'clock, everything was done and over with and he was gone. That's pretty much their timeline. All right, so no response or indication from any juror as to whether they have questions. Court says, all right, thank you, Ms. Wilber, you may step down. Ms. Diener says, Judge, may we release this witness from her subpoena? Mr. Baldwin says, yes. The court says, and you are free to go as well. Thank you. The witness says, thank you. The court says, you may call your next witness. Mr. McLeland says, Judge, State of Indiana would call Breann Harshman, please. McLeland asks, will you state your name, please? Breann Harshman. Spell your last name for the record. He does. How are you employed? I'm employed with the Indiana State Police. And what is your rank? I'm a Master Trooper detective. Detective Harshman, you've testified earlier in this case. Is that correct? I have. And you're familiar. You are the person in the investigation who listened to the phone calls from Richard Allen while he was incarcerated. Is that correct? Yes, sir. You also had an opportunity to view videos while he was incarcerated. Yes, sir. And so he initially started off, or at some point, he was incarcerated at Westville Correctional Facility. Is that correct? Yes, sir. And during the time he was incarcerated there, he was in a one-man cell. He was. And then he was moved to Wabash Valley Correctional Facility. Yes, sir. Was he placed in a one-man cell there? Yes, sir. And then recently moved to Cass County Jail. Is that correct? That's correct. And is he in a one-man cell there? Mr. Rosie says, Judge, I'm going to object at this point to outside the scope. We never had any discussions about any of this during our case in chief. Because they have to respond only to things that the defense brings out. And they can't relitigate stuff that they brought into their case earlier. Unless the defense, brought it out or rebutted it in their case. Mr. McLeland says, Judge, this is rebuttal evidence. They showed videos of him at Westville and his scenario there. This is rebuttal evidence to show the jury that he was in the same type of cell throughout his incarceration. Overruled, says the court. Thank you, says Rosie. You had an opportunity to view video of him while he was at Cass County? I have. And what kind of cell is he in Cass County? He's in a one-person cell in Cass County. Now, in Cass County, he does have I'll call it a day room with a table and a chair. Is that right? Correct. And the cell in Cass County, I think, is a little bit bigger square footage than what was at Westville. It looks to be a little bit bigger, yes. However, does he have as much human contact as at Cass County than he did at Westville? He does not. Does he have an opportunity to have recreation with other inmates at Cass County? He does not. Does he have the opportunity at Westville? Occasionally, when he had rec outside, he was able to communicate with other inmates, yes. Did he have the ability to communicate with other inmates in the cells next to him at Westville? Yes, he stated in phone calls that he would have conversations with his neighbors. Does he have any neighbors to communicate with at Cass County? No. You were able to watch the videos from Westville, correct? Yes. And some of the issues he had there was that he was eating paper and flushing it in the toilet, correct? Yes, sir. Had he had any of those issues at Cass County? Mr. Rosie says, I'm going to object again. This is again outside the scope of his testimony. The last time he testified, or anybody else's testimony, and the court has clearly instructed me to stay away from this time frame. McLeland says, Judge, this is in rebuttal. Mr. Rosie says, this is rebuttal evidence. The court says, well, that's what it is. Mr. Rosie says, he could have asked about this when he was here a week ago. The court says, yes, he could have, and he didn't, and he is on rebuttal allowed to do this. Overruled. Did he, or have you viewed that he's had any of those issues while at Cass County Jail? Not to my knowledge, no. Are they drugging him with Halidol at Cass County against his will, making him psychotic, even more psychotic? Like hallucinations galore, making him unable to, function or say a sentence? All right. So there have been other issues at the Cass County Jail, though, correct? Can you describe those issues? Threats to staff, says the witness. Mr. Rosie says, Judge, I'm going to object at this point. May we approach? The court says yes. And we're going to have a sidebar. And I need to move the dog because he is all over the place. So Mr. Rosie says in sidebar, this is limited and they're trying to present their case in chief and they're trying to use his testimony now to essentially to put this video in to put this video in is what they're trying to do. And it's outside the scope and it's a 403 problem. Exactly what you said. He's going to try to do that with his own words. And in fact, Mr. McLeland says, I'm keeping it something inaudible, but it's just in rebuttal of Dr. Walla, Dr. Westcott's testimony about that he was calm, he was a fragile egg. It's just going to be that he had outbursts in Cass County. That's that, Judge. That's in rebuttal to her testimony. The court says, well, I understand, but now we're getting into that specific something inaudible. I didn't have a problem going into the conditions because that's these conditions, the solitary confinement, but this is on Cass, those conditions. Mr. Rosie says, would you please admonish the jury to strike the last comment? Thank you. Sidebar conference concluded. Now we're back in front of the jury. The court says, all right, I'll sustain your objection, Mr. Rosie, and instruct the jury to disregard. Mr. McLeland says, I don't have any other questions, Judge. Thank you. The court says, Mr. Rosie, Mr. Baldwin? Mr. Rosie says, no. The court says, does anybody on the jury have any questions for Detective Harshman? No response from the jurors. All right, says the court. Thank you, Detective. You may step down. The witness says, thank you, ma'am. The court says, you may call your next witness. Ms. Diener calls Dr. John Martin. And remember, this guy is basically just a rebuttal witness, and he's going to try to counter the fact that Richard Allen had harsh conditions and mental health issues while he was at Westville. We're at 20. Oh, hold on. I got to pause. Sorry, I forgot to pause. I always have to do my little timestamps. It's so much easier to pause and write my timestamps down instead of going through the video later. All right, so direct examination of Dr. John Martin. Who's doing the questions? Ms. Diener will be questioning him. She says, "Good morning, Dr. Martin." He responds, "Good morning. Could you please tell the jury your full name and spell your first and last name?" John Martin, and he spells it. "And Dr. Martin, I'd like the jury to be able to hear everything that you have to tell us today, so speak up a little bit. That microphone does not amplify it for them, and you don't need to be close to it. It's for the court reporter's purpose. So if you could just speak up in a louder voice, thank you. Are you familiar with Richard Allen?" So the court reporter, just a second, had all of this audio, but yet it still took her months and months and months to put this transcript together, even though she had an audio recording of the trials. And most of the inaudibles are during sidebars. Just my observation. Um. All right. So John Martin is on the stand. The question was, "Are you familiar with Richard Allen?" "Yes, I am." "How and why are you familiar with him?" "He was my patient at the Westville Correctional Center from about November of 2022 till November of 2023." "And he was your patient. What services were you providing? What care were you providing to him?" "Psychiatric services." "Psychiatric?" "Psychiatric services." Like he's never heard of psychiatric. Mr. McLeland, or actually, this is Stacy Diener. She's dumb. All right. So, "And what are your qualifications to provide psychiatric services to Mr. Allen?" "I'm a psychiatrist." "Can you tell us where you got your medical degree?" "I got my basic medical education at St. John's Medical College in Bengaluru, Bengaluru, I don't know if I'm saying that right, in India. I entered St. John's in 1969 and I finished in 1979 after having completed 1 year of rotating internships. After that, I started the psychiatry program. I did 3 years. I got a waiver for the first year of the program through the American Board of Psychiatry and Neurology, where they recognized my internship that I'd done earlier. In 1983, I started training to become a psychiatrist. So 1983, 84 to 86. I completed my training through University of Miami, Florida, Jackson Memorial Hospital, and the VA Medical Center in Miami, Florida. "Did you become a licensed psychiatrist in the state of Florida?" "Yes, I did." "Did you also," and that was in 1986. "Did you also," and after that, I started working. He keeps cutting him off. "I'm sorry. Did you also become a licensed psychiatrist in the state of Indiana?" "Yes, I'm licensed in 3 states in Florida, Indiana, and Illinois." "Is your licensure in good standing in all 3 states?" "Yes, it is." "And when did you begin work related to the Indiana Department of Corrections?" "That was sometime in 2020, so I worked there for almost 4 years." "Prior to that, did you work in the area of corrections as well?" "Yes. After I finished my training in psychiatry, full my first full-time job was in the Palm Beach County Jail in Florida, and since 1983, with a few breaks in between when I'd take some sabbaticals, I have worked almost throughout in corrections, and very often I would be working in a prison, and then I'm a workaholic and I like to work a lot, so I would sometimes take a part-time job here and there, and um yeah, take a part-time job here and a part-time job there. Here a job, there a job, everywhere a part-time job. I don't know why that made me think that. Anyways, so if I were to put together all the time that I worked in corrections, I probably have the equivalent of between 40 and 50 years of correctional psychiatric service or care. And so when you say you worked in corrections, just to clarify, are you providing psychiatric services to inmates? Yes. when I say corrections, I'm including jails and prisons. Okay. Because I worked in at least 5 different jails in Florida. I've worked in several prisons in Florida. I have worked in female prisons, male prisons. I've worked in reception centers and permanent camps. I have visited, besides working in some prisons, I have also visited about 16 major prisons in Florida while working on resolving a big lawsuit from 1972 related to the provision of, well, I'm going to direct you services. I'm going to direct you to the care that you were giving to the facility in the facility where Mr. Allen was then. Okay, so what was the nature of your employment at Westville? Uh, at Westville, the Indiana Department of Corrections during 2022 and 2023. Yeah, so from 7/20/20, that's when I started at Indiana State Prison. I was working 40 hours a week there, and then later I started working an additional 20 hours a week in Joliet with the Illinois Department of Corrections. And then sometime in February of 2022, the psychiatrist at Westville, she retired. So there was a big backlog, and we short of shortage of psychiatrists. So they asked me if I could help out. So that's when I started working at Westville. So because of my commitments to other places, I could only work there 1 day a week on Tuesdays, and then I'd try to pick up some additional time working on Sundays, but not in Westville. How did they breathe with these long sentences? Because I can't. I'd go to work at Indiana State Police or at Indiana State Prison because I had computers available there and everything's online. So I'd review all of my notes and all the notes that had been taken by other people on those who I'm gonna see, and those who already had seen. I would review my notes before and prepare for the next visit. By seen, does that mean he goes up there and I don't know, it looks at him and says, "I've observed." I don't know. Anyways, so that's when the Ms. Diener says, "Okay," and this witness just continues on without another question, and so that's when while I was working there at Westville, sometime in November, I don't know the exact, but sometime in November, that's when I first met Mr. Allen. And so in November of 2022, you met Mr. Allen? Yes. Did you establish a place yet at Westville Correctional at the WCU where you could add notes to your medical records by the time Mr. Allen was a patient? Did you have a place where you could go to make records? No. I had an office in Westville. It was in one building and in another building, a very secure facility within the Westville compound. There was this very secure building called the WCU Westville Correction Unit, I guess, and that's where Mr. Allen was housed. He had been transferred from the jail to Westville as a safekeeper because he was considered. It was felt that he was in danger in in the county jail, and so he was transferred to us in the Department of Corrections for his safety. That's sus. Okay, so you didn't have an office in the WCU? No, but you had one on the property. Right. Where you could go. Right. And enter your medical notes, findings, and documents into the secure system. Is that correct? Yes, ma'am. Yes, ma'am. Okay, and were you actually an employee of Indiana Department of Corrections or from another? No, company. No, I was never an employee of the Department of Corrections. I was working for Centurion, which is a company that provides medical service to the prisons. Were all of your patients at WCU during this time, or were you? No, were they at other facilities? No, I had patients who were on the campground in general population, but there were a few people who were housed in the WCU. So I'm glad, or so I'd go over there and see them, and then I'd go back to my office. which is in the medical building, and I'd sit down there and write my notes. Okay, so when you would meet with Mr. Allen for a medical visit, would you then go to your other office to make records about your visit with him? Yes. Sometimes I had to see several people, so I'd go and see everyone, and then I'd go back there and I'd write my notes. Okay. And so did you have written documents that would have prepared that would have prepared that you had prepared? Sorry. Oh my God, I'm losing it. Do you have any written documents that you had prepared that you then entered into the system? Not always. It's just jot down some notes on a piece of paper and then I'll go down and write everything on that computer. Okay. Are those records kept in a secure system? The whole computer system is supposed to be secure. And so, would you have a login? Would you have a login in order to create that record? Yes. Could anyone else go in and make a record and put your name to it? No. Okay, and I'll ask you another question. So you don't have to do this twice. And so were you a physician that would be prescribing medications to Mr. Allen? Yes, the psychiatrist is the one who prescribes the psychotropic medications. And were you also aware of medication that he came to WCU prescribed previously that he was going to be continuing to take while he was there? Yes, when he came from the reception center, he came in on Prozac, an antidepressant, because he had a history of depression and anxiety. So I examined him, I met with him, I interviewed him for the first time, as I said, in early November, and then I continued him with the same medication. He was stable on that, so there was no need to make any changes. Okay. And so any changes that you made to mental health related conditions, would that be kept in a particular record for when it was administered or given to Mr. Allen? There are my notes, and then as part of those notes, there's a form for writing orders, doctor's orders, and then the nurses keep a track of whether he's taking medication or not. So we call that an MAR, which stands for Medication Administration Report. So those MARs are strictly written by the nurses. They sign off when he takes his medication and if he doesn't take, and they sign off for that date by putting their initials. And then if he doesn't take his medication, they'll sign their initials and they'll circle it to indicate that he refused his medication. Interesting. And so is that a record where you would use and reply in order to monitor whether Richard Allen was taking his medication or not? Yes, that is. Yes. That is one way in which I could do that. But what would happen is nurses usually inform us he refused his medication before we even took a look at it. Okay. But it is a record that's created. Yeah, it is yeah, it's a record and it's there, it's available, and anyone can look at it. It's anyone in medical. I mean, not security staff, but medical has access to that. Okay. And so a medical, or I'm sorry, medi a medication administration record, that something that is that something that's regularly kept in your business? Yeah, it's there. Yeah. Ms. Diener says, "May I approach the witness, Judge?" You may. Dr. Martin, I'd like to show you first what's been marked as State's Exhibit 319. It has multiple pages. If you would flip through that and tell me whether you recognize that. Do you recognize those documents? Yes. What are those? These are notes that I wrote on a patient. These also, there's also a consent form that he signed for Prozac. There is a, do they accurately reflect the records that were associated with your treatment of him while he was at WCU? Yes, it does. They do. Thank you. I'm going to show you what's marked as States Exhibit 320, also multiple documents. Yeah, take a look at that. Let me know if you recognize that. Do you recognize that? Yes, I do. These are the MAR, the Medication Administration Reports. Okay. And so would these reports be the records you referred to that you would rely on with regard? Yes. To the administration of medication? Compliance, yeah. And so they would also reflect with regard to mental health medications that you ordered? Right. All of the medications, whether prescribed by medical or prescribed by me, they're there. Okay, Judge, the state would move to admit exhibits 319 and 320 and request that the doctor be able to refer to these for his testimony. The state's exhibit 319 and 320 were offered. Mr. Rosie says, "May I ask a preliminary question on 320?" Yes, says the court. Mr. Rosie says, "Dr. Martin, I'm looking at 320, which is a prescription medication regimen records. There are a lot of different initials on here from what appear to be different people. Do you acknowledge that?" Yes. So, or rather, do you acknowledge that there are, yeah, many other initials on here from various other people throughout this whole period of time with reference to these documents? Yes or no? Yes. And with these people are not you, right? No, these are nurses. Okay, other medical staff. Yes, these are nurses, different shapes, different days. What? Mr. Rosie says, "Judge, I object. I don't have any problem with 319, but 320, based on it's just loaded in here with hearsay. I mean, there's no foundation. I mean, it's Ms. Diener says, Judge, the doctor will be asked to reference this with regard to when he ordered particular medications and also documents with regards to refusal of medication, so we believe it is irrelevant or it is relevant to his testimony and the jury can make a decision as to whether they would rely upon a nurse's note. But it is a medical record in the regular course of business and one that Dr. Martin would rely upon in his treatment of Mr. Allen. The court says, all right, I'll show that 319 is admitted without objection and I'll show 320 is admitted over objection. Mr. Rosie says, thank you. The court says, you're welcome. Ms. Diener says, may the witness refer to these for his testimony, Judge? Yes, says the court. I'm going to start with one. So, thank you. So, I guess they're just going through all of the boards. I don't know. What did he ask? Something about the safekeeper. Is that correct? Yes, that's correct. You made reference to knowing about the safekeeper. And there's also a reference to someone being in solitary confinement. Are you familiar with that reference? Yes, I am. And are you familiar, based on your experience with the work in the prison systems, with the difference between a safekeeper and someone who's in solitary? Yes, my understanding is that a person sometimes is transferred to prison for his safekeeping because it is thought that he's not safe in the local county jail for his protection. He's transferred to us in the prison system because we are in a better position to keep him safe. And and so they're known as safekeepers. Do you have any experience other than Mr. Allen in treating a safekeeper in a prison setting like WCU? I have treated safekeepers who were in general population, but Mr. Allen was in what could be referred to as solitary confinement, but also can be referred to as a one-man cell. Oh, so he's got a cozy little one-man cell in prison. He's got his own little single. Like, what? It's not a dorm. Like, what are we talking about? It's solitary confinement, and he can't leave. He can't leave the cell ever unless they're, taking him to rec or taking him to a shower. That's about it. And he didn't even get a shower every day. It's like every 2 or 3 days. It's just a one-man little cozy cell with a room and a view and really no view because his window was cracked, and also no bed. You have no box spring. You have just a mattress on the floor. That's all you have. But really, it's just a cozy little one-man single cell that, most prisoners would be grateful to have. Why are we looking a gift horse in the mouth? This is something that most people would want. That's pretty much how they're saying it. Like, oh, it was a nice little cozy cell. Mm-mm. I don't buy it. All right, he goes on. The reason why I just want to explain why I talk about a one-man cell rather than solitary confinement is because though it is the same room, the person who is put in solitary confinement, it has a punitive connotation that the person has done something wrong in prison. He has broken some rule or regulation, and he's being punished by isolating him from other people for a certain period of time. Depending on the charges, whatever rule he broke, so he gets time there and so he's locked up. Whereas Mr. Allen had not done anything wrong in the prison system, he had not broken any rule or regulation, and yet he was shit, I lost my place. He was being treated as though he had done something wrong in the prison. Well, oh, really? You want to? I'm surprised he even gave us that admission right there that he's being treated as though he had done something wrong. Like this is a punishment for something. When this is how they just treated him, just being a pretrial detainee, which is insane. I got coffee because my brain's slowing down now. I'm about an hour in. This is my absolute favorite mug from San Francisco. We had like a family trip there a while ago. This was a while ago. I'm talking, I was in I think my freshman year of college. And it was like a family trip, and we all went to San Francisco, and I got this as a souvenir for myself. And I love this cup of coffee. It's big, it stays warm, and I just love it. So I'm shout out to San Francisco mugs. They make them really well because I've had this for years. I also would cry if anything happened to it. Okay. So even though there's a risk of serious harm to his mental health by putting him in solitary confinement, the mission or the need to keep him alive and safe from the overriding decision, I think that was the overriding thought in the mind of the warden when he chose to, where he should be housed. That's better. Okay. It wasn't all the way up. Now I lost my spot. Here we are. It wasn't as big as it could be, the page. Well, and you don't know who chose for him to be housed there, correct? I have no idea. I'm just assuming that. Okay. So, were there things that do you have a familiarity with someone being in solitary confinement from your work? Yes, I've almost all the prisons that I've worked in have been major, high security prisons that we've had a lot of people in solitary confinement. And as a matter of fact, for a whole year, I was in charge of a program supervising 5 prisons, including one for women, where we had all of the people who were in solitary confinement across the state of Florida all brought to these 5 prisons. Okay. They were all solitary confinement cases. Okay, so by comparison, were you familiar with things that Mr. Allen had available to him in order to differentiate safekeeping from solitary confinement in order to provide contact with others? Well, we did have a lot of meetings with the warden, the head service administrator, the psychologist, the psychologist for the Department of Corrections, the lawyer for the Department of Corrections, all, and of course, the warden and the assistant warden, to see what we would do to make life a little bit more comfortable for him while he was in prison, like giving him access to a tablet, to a TV, recreation, phone calls, as much as could be done, in that secure prison. So basically, it was like the Ritz. He had it so great there, is what they're trying to make us believe. So were you aware that he had a self-unaliving companion at his door? Yeah. There were times when he had expressed that kind of thinking. What we call self-unaliving ideations. And there were times when he actually did something to hurt himself. So during those periods of time, he would be kept on a watch. He'd be given a self-unaliving gown. He wouldn't, and then he'd be given a self-unaliving blanket. He would have no sheets with which he could try to hang himself, things like that. So that's supposed to tell us that he had it really good. He had to live in a smock all the time. Okay. And we did what we could to see that he was safe. Okay. And you were aware whether he was being taken out of his cell for certain things, so he had an opportunity to leave that space, like seeing Dr. Walla. Yes, like for example, if he had to be seen by medical, if he had to be seen by Dr. Walla, the psychologist, if he had to be seen by me, sometimes I'd call him outside his cell, but sometimes I would see him inside his cell because it was not safe, for a good reason he couldn't be taken out. What? Why? And every time yes. And when he went out for recreation, when he went out to make phone calls to his family and wife. Judge, may I interject and ask a foundational question? Court says, sure. Mr. Rosie says, Dr. Martin, you're talking about all these things Rick Allen did. You only met him 18 times in 13 months, right? Yes. Mr. Rosie says, okay. Well, yeah, I didn't. Mr. Rosie says, that's what you told me a month ago, right? Yeah, okay. Mr. Rosie says, so you weren't there when he was doing all those things, were you? No, but I know that these things were done because we were discussing these things. Did you ever watch any of the? I didn't. Video? I did not. Or further review any of the video of him in his cell in that prison? No. Did you ever review any of the camcorder video when he was being moved around to various places? No, but I saw the camera. That doesn't mean diddly squat. You, I once spotted the camera with my own eyes, the camera that took those photos, but no, I did not see the things actually captured by those photos in real time. So odd. That was an odd answer, but I saw the camera. He didn't watch it, but he saw it. He knew the camera existed. Okay, buddy. Judge, I object. He says, I object to this line of questioning, says Rosie. He says, I saw him being recorded. Judge, I object. I mean, I saw the officer with the camcorder. Miss Rosie says, Judge, would you please instruct the witness, sir, stop. What is your objection? Mr. Rosie says, my objection is he has no foundation to testify where Mr. Allen went because he didn't even see him. Ms. Diener says, Judge, I think the witness was about to say he's seen him being recorded as he's being moved, and he did see him over the course of a year. The fact that he's not there every day or hasn't watched camcorder video doesn't mean that he isn't familiar with the circumstances of his housing. Overruled, says the court. You said most of your visits are not inside his cell, so you like to take him out. So you've only been in his cell maybe a handful of times. If you've only seen him 13 times, once a month and probably every month he was there, because he was there for 13 months in solitary. Mr. Rosie says thank you. Ms. Diener, right? Ms. Diener is doing the questioning. Okay, so let's talk about your initial assessment of Mr. Allen, please. Okay, can I refer to my notes? What was his mental health condition can I refer to my notes? Yes. Okay, so I would usually go to Westville on Tuesdays. Before I went to Westville, I would be given a list of patients that I was going to see. Mr. Rosie says, I'm going to object to non-responsive to the question. Sustained. Thank you. Dr. Martin, I need you to specifically answer the question about your initial assessment of Mr. Allen. Okay, in November of 2022. Okay, so how he was doing from a, mental health perspective. Initial evaluations, the first time I saw him face to face was on the 8th of November. Okay. He had recently come from the reception center, and I had a day or the Sunday earlier, I had reviewed what had been written in the reception center on him. So when I saw him, I asked him a few more questions to add to that database and do a mental status exam. And at that point in time, when I saw him, he was stable. There were no questions that I could see. He has a history of depression, but he did not seem to be depressed. He had a history of anxiety, but he did not seem to show any signs or symptoms of anxiety. So I continued him on the medication. So that was the first time I saw him. The next time I saw him was 3 weeks later on the 29th of November. Again, everything seemed to be fine. He didn't seem to have any problems. The next time I saw him was in January on the, I think, 29th. No, you can take a look, or you can take the time to look, she says. On the 24th of January. And at that time, when I saw him, so he's been there since November. This dude's only seen him 3 times, and it's like a quick little look at him and then leave, I'm sure. You know, like, okay, give him his meds. Or continue whatever meds, or change this or that, or whatever. So on the 24th of January, and at that time when I saw him, I said I need him to sign consent for medication. Really? We know he didn't sign for consent for medication. And the Halidol was not by his consent. Because usually we try to get consent signed once a year, and I wanted to make sure that he had signed it. And if I may be allowed to digress a little bit, informed consent is something that's really important for us. Of course, you're going to emphasize that because you know that this was drugs that were given to him without his consent. Now, normally when a patient does go to see a doctor and he's got some infection, the doctor might write a prescription for an antibiotic. That patient goes and fills it up, and that's okay. But for mental health patients, anytime a psychiatrist is writing a prescription, he first gets an informed consent form signed by that patient so that is different in psychology or psychiatry versus general medicine. General medicine. Thank you. Now, in general medicine too, people do sign informed consent forms. Mr. Rosie says, Judge, I'm going to object at this point. It's non-responsive. Sustained. So, Dr. Martin, we have to move on. Okay, from the subject, but he did sign a consent for Prozac. Is that correct? Yes, he did. Okay, that was on the 24th. Up to this point, and the 24th of January, he just butts in, like he constantly interrupts people. I don't like this guy. It's hard to read. Okay, up to this point, he was continued on. Everything was fine. Everything. Medication previously ordered. Yes, yes. Correct? Yes, yes. Okay, and so after you saw him in January on the 24th, what would have been the normal time frame between then and your next visits with Mr. Allen? Well, since he was doing well, according to our protocol, I was allowed to see him every 6 months. Once every 6 months? Or even once every 3 months, but we extended it to once every 6 months. So I was supposed to see him sometime in April to the latter, January 4th, so maybe April 24th. was when I was likely to see him again. That's not 6 months, but okay. This guy doesn't know math or anything. Okay, so when you saw him in January, was he still doing okay? Yes, he was doing fine. Okay. And so then, did you see him in April? Yes, I did. Was it at a regularly scheduled time or different? No, it was not. I got a phone call from the health service administrator, Ms. Ms. Bridegroom. And without telling us what she said, did her call to you prompt you to go see Mr. Allen unexpectedly? Yes. It was not planned. Okay. And as we talk about this, I want you to provide information to us just based on your own observations and not necessarily information from others unless you're prompted to, okay? Okay. All right. So when you see Mr. Allen on April 13th, you said correct? Yes. Was he still at WCU? Yes, he was. And what did you observe about Mr. Allen during your visit? So I'm going to read from my notes. So when I went to Westville that day, I was met by the warden and other people, and I was able to look into the cell in which patient Allen was housed. He was lying naked on a mattress. He was, Judge, I'm gonna object to the form of testimony. He's reading from his notes. If she wants to use his notes to refresh his recollection, Ms. Diener says that was not to refresh. Mr. Rosie says improper refreshing. Ms. Diener says, Judge, it was not intended to refresh his recollection. It was in order to assist him in his testimony so he can be accurate about what he documented regarding his visits with Mr. Allen because there's 18 records here and he can't be expected to memorize that. The court says, well, but he shouldn't be reading from the records. Ms. Diener says, okay. Okay, says the witness. Would you please? Okay. Read your notes from that date and then I'll summarize it. So he was naked. He had feces smeared on him. There was some brownish fluid in his mouth, and I was told that he had been eating feces. But you did not see that? No, I did not see that. That's what I was told. But what I saw was that he was naked and I saw the brown fluid coming out of his mouth and he had feces on himself. Then I asked, I said I need to talk to him. So what they did was the officers practically carried him to a shower stall and they hosed him down so that he could be cleaned. Then they gave him a new self-unaliving gown and then they brought him into the nurse's office, which is very close there. It was a large room, which is mostly used as a storage room, but the nurse, her table was right there. And so I tried to assess him there. And so let me ask you this. Based on your observations of Mr. Allen on that day, did you draw a conclusion about his mental health? Yes. And that was different than how he appeared in January? Yeah, and what was your conclusion? This attorney keeps cutting him off because she's asking yes or no questions and he's trying to go into a whole tangent and she's shutting him down. What was your conclusion? The presentation was different. My conclusion at that point was that he was psychotic. Okay, hold on. We got puppy problems. Oh, puppy problems. Okay, he's making me click on things that I don't want to click on as I'm recording. Sorry. Okay, you stay there. Behave. The witness says the presentation was different. My conclusion at that point was that he was psychotic. Okay. Okay. And so, based on your conclusion, how did that impact your treatment of Mr. Allen from a medical standpoint? Okay. Ow, you're biting me. Stop biting me. Here's a bone. Stop biting my finger. Nope. He has a million toys, a million bones, and all he wants to do is bite my hand. So I felt that he could not give consent, and I said, we have a backup system in the prison system, how we can get patients, like when they are in such a situation, to give them medication over and above their objections. He's basically saying, we have protocol that means I can give him Halidol involuntarily without a consent form. Remember, he's like, our consent forms are really important to us. But we also have this backup where if we need to, we can just shoot him up with psychotropic drugs. What medication is it that you thought was appropriate at that point for Mr. Allen? So the medication that I chose that I wanted to give him was Halidol, which is an antipsychotic, and it has an advantage, the injection. See, Halidol comes in 3 forms. It comes in an oral, as a tablet, or a capsule, which you can take by mouth. It comes as a short-acting injection, which has a very short half-life, and then it also comes in a Halidol decanoate. I don't know if I'm saying that right, which is a long-lasting preparation which stays in the system for up to a month. So we give those shots once a month, So that's how we use Halidol. From my understanding, Richard Allen had the monthly shots, so it was in his system all the time. Okay, so since Mr. Allen was not considered able to consent to Halidol, what steps did you take in order to get him the medication that you felt he needed? Okay, so what I did after that, after seeing him on the 13th of April, when I felt that he was not competent to give informed consent, I called up Dr. William Mays, who's the regional psychiatrist for Centurion for the region for the state of Indiana, and I explained to him my findings, and I said, we need to have an emergency meeting to see that we can give him involuntary medication. So we had an emergency meeting the very next day. In the meeting, I explained to the committee, which is a panel of 3, 2 psychiatrists, including Dr. Mays and Dr. Stephen Bonner, and Dr. Walla, the psychologist who was at Westville. So these 3 agreed that he was psychotic and that he, because of his presentation, they said he could be given meds, involuntary medication, and so that's how I started him on medication. Because they told him you could do it. That's how. Is there a particular form in the medical records that would reflect this meeting that you had in order to address medication needs? Yes, it's there. It is there is a report dated 4/14. That's the day after I saw him in that psychotic state. Okay. So there's a report there where we have it's like the minutes for the meeting involving me explaining my findings, giving the diagnosis and the recommendation for the medication because it's a long acting medication. What happens or what might happen if he were not put on the medication, what other forms of treatment we were going to provide, like therapy and monitoring by medical and by nurses, etc., etc. I got to deal with this dog because he will not stop biting me. I'll be back. Hold on. Good. He went outside. Okay. So it's he says it's the report dated 4/14, and then he continues on. So there's a report there where we have been we have it's like the minutes for that meeting involving me. Oh, I read that already. I don't remember it because I was being bit so hard. And so what is the name of that form? Well, it's called within the record. Sorry to interrupt you. It's called the Report of Treatment Review Committee. It's dated 4/14/2023. Okay, and so does the first page contain recommendations or information you would have provided to the committee? Yes. And then on page 2, does that include information about criteria that were met in order for Mr. Allen to receive the medication? Yes, it at the top of that form, there's a little box checked off. It says Treatment Review Committee concurs with involuntary admission of psychotropic medication. Below that, there is a little panel which says basis for decision, and there the criteria are documented for the reasons why he was put on that medication. So easily. They just had this meeting and were like, yep, let's put him on it. Don't even consult like his wife, his next of kin, his family, nothing. Just We're going to inject him with psychotropic drugs. Okay. And so who would make the decision about what criteria was met in order for Mr. Allen to receive the Halidol? Was it a group decision? Yes. That's that panel, the 3 on that panel. So they are independent of me because I'm the treating physician and I'm presenting the case, and they're the ones who review the case and they ask the questions, etc. But once everything's clarified, then they said, I agree, I agree, I agree. And then, okay, so then could you briefly describe the medication regimen that you ordered for Mr. Allen with regard to the Halidol? So now I'll describe and I'll also give you reasons why I did that. Whenever you now in his chart, it said objection, non-responsive. It said no, sustained. Sir, stop. Miss Diener says, hold on one second. The court says, sustained. Please describe for us the Halidol medication that you prescribed for him with specificity. Okay, so I wanted to make sure that he's not going to have any allergies or reactions to the medication. Okay. He's still not answering the question. He can't even say what the Halidol is or what he prescribed or how, like the doses, nothing, like how he can't even tell us what he did. Mr. Rosie again says objection non-responsive. The witness continues to say allergic to Halidol. Sustained. So I, so I, Mr. decided to give him a short acting. Dr. Martin, dose of Halidol. Dr. Martin, I have to direct your responses with questions, and you need to answer just the question that I ask, okay? Okay, I'll try. I don't think it's going to work, but we'll try it. Dr. Martin, I have to, oh, I said that, okay. So you were explaining that you gave him short-acting Halidol. How many doses and with what frequency did he get the short-acting Halidol? Okay, so Halidol lactate is the short-acting. Okay, injectable form. I gave him 5 milligrams of Halidol. Okay, by intramuscular once a day. Once a day. So he was getting it once a day? I didn't know that. The max dose is 100 milligrams. So he was getting a low dose, just 5 milligrams. That's all. In his little ritzy one single cell, one person cell. How often? So you got that on the 14th, 15th, 16th, 17th. And did he have any reaction? So he didn't have any side effects, no reaction. So I said, okay, so now I can go ahead and give him the long. Okay, dude. Hold on one second. So he was getting it every day, at least on the 14th, 15th, 16th, and 17th. Only 5 milligrams in his muscle. Did he have any reaction? So he didn't have any side effects, no reaction. So I said, okay, so now I can go ahead and give him the long-acting preparation because once it's in him, and he has a reaction, then I can, it's a problem. So this way, now I know that he's not having a reaction, he's not having side effects. So I asked for him to get 50 milligrams of Halidol decanoate every 4 weeks. The long-acting stuff that stays in your system for a month. And that is the long-acting. That's the long-acting. Okay, the max dose of Halidol decanoate is 450. Oh, he said that. That was not a question. Sorry. He said the max dose of Halidol is 450. So he's only getting 50. So was his dose. So the dose he was getting was relatively small, but if you consider that medication is for 30 days and he's getting 50 milligrams, he's actually getting the equivalent of little less than 2 milligrams a day. But it's not because you're getting it all at once in your body. It's not like it slowly releases 2 milligrams at a time. That's not how it works. She says, okay, thank you. So this is less than what he was getting when I was trying out for side effects. What? Oh, so it's less than what he was getting when he was trying out for side effects, less than the 5 milligrams. And so at this point, then, do you need to monitor him to determine whether the medication is addressing the diagnosis of psychosis? Right. And so, how frequently did you then see him after the long acting Halidol? Okay, so I saw him on the 18th, which was a Tuesday. So the next time I saw him was on the 25th. And on the 18th was the first administration. Yes, that's the day when he got the first dose. Okay, okay. Why is he always question her? On that particular day, did he still present as psychotic? Yes. Okay, and you said the next time you saw him was April 25th on that particular day. Did he still present as psychotic? Yes. However, there was some improvement. What would you have observed that would indicate improvement? Okay, so earlier on the 13th of April, he was at the height of his psychotic experience or the presentation. Is that based on your observations of him? Yeah, and it's documented in my notes. Okay. 13th of April. Okay. So after that, he showed slight improvement when he got the. My dog is playing under my table, under my desk. He's going crazy. He's feisty this afternoon as I record. He's being weird. But I went ahead and started him on the long acting medication on the 18th, and on the 25th, there was improvement. Could you look at your note for notes for April 25th, 2023 and tell us in what aspects he was showing improvement? Okay. Okay. So one of the things was that when I saw him on the 25th, there was no evidence of him smearing himself with feces or eating feces. He recognized me. He was not talking much. So I would walk away and then he'd say, "Doctor," and I'd go back and I'd try to talk to him at a cell. He did it that 3 times. He called out to me, "Doctor," 3 times, and he did not know the date on that occasion, though he knew that he was now in prison. And this is one of the things I was looking for. Is he oriented to person, place, time, and situation? So, in what aspects was he oriented? He was oriented at least to person and to situation. He knew he was in prison, and then he started asking for a dry blanket. He was not very communicative, as I said, but he was asking for his wife. He was asking for the warden. He was chanting Delphi. He was asking for chocolates, Taco Bell. Well, I'm asking you. And so he was showing some improvement in his speech, okay? And as far as coherence is concerned, okay, looseness of associations, flight of ideas, tangibility that he had displayed earlier on the 13th when he was at the height of his psychosis. So there was, and at the time, he was also having hallucinations because when I saw him, he was talking to, and that means he was responding to some voices that he was hearing in his head. But this time, I did not see that. Okay. Okay, he was so he was oriented to person, place, and situation. His memory did not seem to be affected. He was eating his meals. He seemed to be getting enough sleep. He was interested in his personal hygiene when asking for a shower and a haircut. But at the same time, though, he was wetting his blanket, his self-unaliving blanket. He was not smearing himself with feces or eating it as he had been doing the previous week. So there was improvement. There was some sadness, but that was situational. Okay. But otherwise, there was a good amount of improvement in his presentation. Then you saw him next on what date? The next time I saw him was on the 2nd of May. And that's in 2023? 2023, yes. And if you would review your notes so we can discuss that particular visit. And I want you to review it and then we'll talk about it. Yes. So on this date, what did you observe about Mr. Allen? So on this date, what I observed was that he was lying on his mattress. When I called him, he came, covered himself with the self-unaliving blanket because he had the self-unaliving gown on, and he also had the self-unaliving blanket, and he covered himself with that too. But he was coherent. There was no looseness of association or flight of ideas. He denied auditory or visual hallucinations. There was no evidence that I could see of psychosis. Okay, and then when did you see him after May 2nd? I beg your pardon? What was the next May 2nd visit? Yeah, May 2nd. After May 2nd. I'm sorry. Okay, so the next time I saw him was on May 8th, which is about a week later. What did you observe about Mr. Allen on that particular date? So here again, he was wearing the self-unaliving gown. He was coherent, spoke without any looseness of associations or flight of ideas. He denied auditory or visual hallucinations. He was oriented to person, place, situation. He was a little sad, and the review of the log showed that he was getting a reasonable amount of sleep and he was eating his meals, though not all of them. And he had been going to meet with Dr. Wella for therapy sessions. He was not consistent in taking oral medication because I had added a little bit of Halidol because I wanted to get him stabilized quickly. I didn't know for how long I was going to continue the oral medication, but I put him on a little bit, and I knew that he was not likely to take it, regularly. So I gave him a slightly higher dose than I would normally have done. Huh? But still, the doses were really very low, and he would take the medication, refuse it sometimes, and that's all recorded there in the Mars. And then I put down in my notes, he was much improved. Judge, same objection as before, and does not appear to be psychotic. The court says, sir. Mr. Rosie says, the same objection as earlier. The court says, yeah, hold on. Mr. Rosie says, reading from his notes. The court says, please don't read from your notes. So on that day, this witness is horrible. On that day, again, when I saw him, he did not show any signs or symptoms of psychosis. Okay, can you stop with the... Okay, you can be on screen. I guess he wants to be on camera. Only a little bit. Look over here. No, he doesn't want to. Okay. He's got to like cuddle up on me to fall asleep. It's cute, but also he's very clingy. But I love him, so it's okay. Uh, okay, and so the next visit then, Dr. Martin? Okay, the next visit is a week later. So now on this, Dr. Martin, go ahead and read. This time to summary is, again, he was not psychotic. Mr. Rosie says, objection, non-responsive. Overruled. Dr. Martin says, will you read the note to yourself? I'm sorry, not Dr. Martin says that. Stacy Diener says, Dr. Martin, will you read the note to yourself? He says, okay, and then I'll take it. All right. So we don't have objections. Fine. Okay. Got to take it away from him because he can't just stay on track or not read from his notes. Stacy says, hang on. Okay, what did you observe about Mr. Allen on that date? Okay, so on that date, too, there was no evidence of psychosis. Okay, and then that was the 18th of May. Do you agree? No, 25th. 23rd? 25th. Did I say 25th? 25th of April. We're still in April, he says. Okay. Oh, yes, you're right. Would you agree? Yeah, says the witness. It appears that the next record in your medical records is May 30th of 2023. Do you have any reason to doubt that? Yes. No. Okay. Take a look at that note and then give it back to me. Mr. Rosie says, I'm sorry, what day are we on? Excuse me. 30th of May, says the witness. Mr. Rosie says, May 13th? Thank you. 30, says Stacy Diener. He says, thank you. Okay. So on May 30th, what do you observe about Mr. Allen? So again, on this date, I did not find any evidence of psychosis. He was eating his meals. He was oriented to person, place, time, situation. The speech was coherent. There was no auditory or visual hallucinations. He was going for therapy sessions. He was, in fact, He was about to meet with Dr. Walla just a few minutes after I saw him. I think may have spoken to his wife on the phone, or I don't remember, but everything was fine. I mean, there was no evidence of psychosis. Okay, but the next record here is June 20th of 2023. Will you review that one? Okay, how was Mr. Allen's mental health progressing on June 20th of 2023? Was there evidence of psychosis? Okay, so on June 20th, there was no evidence of psychosis. Okay. So he had not been psychotic for 7 weeks starting from 5/20, and so that day I decided I'm going to stop the medication. Now he said he had received a shot 2 or 3 days before, but I wrote the order for him not to get any more injections. Oh, so they were giving him injections even after you just said don't give him any more. This is not a good look for the state. This doesn't help them. So was the injection you described as being a very low dose? Were the subsequent injections also very low doses? The same dose, 15 milligrams every 4 weeks. Okay. And on that particular day, was he able to communicate with you coherently and have flight of ideas? Yes. So there was no evidence of psychosis. His speech was coherent. There was no tangentiality. There was no flight of ideas. There was no evidence of hallucinations or delusions. There was nothing that told me to think that he was still psychotic. He'd been free of psychosis for 7 weeks, and I said, now it's time to stop the medication. So for the 20th of June, I stopped his medication. Was that something you would have committed or communicated to him? I'm not sure. I mean, if I did not document it. Okay, was there anything else of note that you documented on that day with regard to your conversation with Mr. Allen? That day, he said something to me. He said these things to other people, but it was the first time he said it to me, and the day I decided to take him off medication because he was not psychotic, and when he was not psychotic, he was not under any pressure, no duress, spontaneously of his own free will. He said to me, I would like to apologize to the families of, his victims. He did not say the victims, he said his victims. And so you documented that? Yeah, and I documented that. Okay, now after June 20th of 2023, you continued seeing Mr. Allen on a regular basis, is that correct? Yeah, I continued seeing him, to continue him on the Prozac, but I had stopped the antipsychotic on the 20th because, like I said, from the 20th of May, he had not been psychotic. And what is the purpose of Halidol? Halidol is an antipsychotic. It's for the treatment. Well, for lay people, can you explain it for us? Yes. Okay. So I hope you can give me a few minutes. Well, I'm not sure we have a few minutes. Can we have, okay, the abbreviated, okay, version of, oh my God, you cannot get a word in edgewise with this guy. I'll give you the abbreviated of the purpose of Halidol. Every, every like transition between questions, it's him interrupting everybody. He says, I'll give you the abbreviated version. Okay, the abbreviated version is this. When people have psychosis, some of the manifestations are the person might hear voices. Okay, so we also described the word psychosis by saying the person has, Judge, I'm going to object as non-responsive, poor contact with reality, sustained. I think this guy has poor contact with reality. Dr. Wilson here. He can't answer a single question straight. This is so bizarre. He is not a good witness for the state. This guy just rambles on. He doesn't answer. He can't focus on the gosh darn question. He talks over everybody and just thinks that he runs the show. I'm baffled by this expert witness. And he keeps doing it after being sustained. Do you think that they hire, I don't know, but it's possible if you're the prosecution and you have a really bad case, it's possible to hire an expert just to confuse the jury and to make, to act stupid or to act dumb, and then, or incompetent or whatever, just just so you have someone to like come back at them with in rebuttal. I don't get it. And to confuse the jury, because that's what I think they're trying to do here, honestly. Can you explain on the effects of Halidol that would be helpful in addressing Mr. Allen's symptoms? Yes. So, like I said, psychosis is poor contact with reality. And the purpose of the antipsychotic is to get this person back again so that he has contact with reality. Okay. In other words, he's not hearing voices, he's not seeing things, he's not delusional, his speech is coherent, his behavior is appropriate. And those are the symptoms that he had been exhibiting. And now I put him on the medication and he is no longer exhibiting those symptoms. So I cured him, is what this guy's thinking. Okay. Now, we had other testimony that said that psychosis could come from a variety of factors. One might be abuse of illicit drugs. Was that present in Mr. Allen? No, I don't think that was, because he was in a secure facility. He was in a single cell, and anything that he received through a meal slot was being monitored. There was an officer sitting outside there watching what's going on. Okay. There was also testimony by another witness that a problem with current medication could cause psychosis. Was that a factor for Mr. Allen? No, the medication that he was on was an antidepressant. Judge, I'm going to object at this point. The witness continues saying Ms. Diener says judge. Mr. Rosie says that assumes facts, not an evidence. That wasn't the testimony. Ms. Diener says judge. Sorry, go ahead. Mr. Rosie says the statement. The question is based on a statement that if somebody else said that a medical problem could cause psychosis, and I think the discussion that related to was delirium. Sustained. Dr. Martin, would the medication of Prozac play any role in Mr. Allen having psychosis? No. Would him refusing Prozac at any time have any role in his psychosis? No. I actually want to say I have a feeling this might not be true, because I've been on an old doctor of mine put me on Cymbalta, which is like an antidepressant, which I never wanted. I didn't want an antidepressant, but she said it might help with the pain. So I'm like, anything for the pain. Didn't really help with the pain, and now I'm stuck on an antidepressant for the rest of my life, unless I can wean myself off, which takes years in the making, and you have to do it very slowly because it really fucks you up. I mean, it fucks you up. I weaned myself off of Cymbalta to get onto Lexapro, which is less I don't know, it still messes you up. And if you miss a day, oh my God, I have the worst withdrawals. Just any kind of like difference in your prescription can give you the worst withdrawals. So if let's say he's on Wellbutrin all the time in his life, and then he's been managing his problems with Wellbutrin for forever, and now he comes to prison and they're like, oh, guess what? We don't have that, but we have Prozac we can put you on. Well, everyone responds differently to these drugs, and it makes you, some people, like, you can actually feel psychotic or have symptoms of psychosis when when you don't have the right dose and you're trying around and messing around with these prescriptions. It can make you feel like you're going crazy or make you feel like you want to die because you've got such bad withdrawals and the world is spinning around you. So, just my advice, don't do it if you don't need it. Don't take antidepressants if you don't need to. My doctor kind of forced me, or tricked me, I should say, and now I'm stuck and I really want to get off of them. They also dull your emotions too. It's kind of sucky because I don't feel as deeply as I used to with my emotions. It's crazy. Anyways, all right, so Prozac. He says, no psychosis, no withdrawals, no nothing. You're fine. You can just mess around with all these drugs, no problem. If you miss a day, you're going to have withdrawals. You're going to have crazy like it's going to mess with your mind. So if you start missing days and if you're not taking it on a regular basis, you absolutely could have psychosis. So I think this is a totally bullshit answer. The Prozac, as it appears in the medication administration record, does it have another name that it appears as in the record? Yes. So Prozac is the brand name, fluoxetine is the general name. Okay. So so sometimes the nurses will write fluoxetine in the medical because the medical or the medication that they're getting from the pharmacy, the outside pharmacy that they're supplying us, it's coming from fluoxetine, the generic form, because that's cheaper than the brand name. Understood. Judge, I'll pass the witness. The court says, would counsel approach? And we're going to go into a sidebar. The court, sorry, no, Rosie says, I told you this witness, I told you. The court says, do you know how long Cross is going to take considering he wants to go on and on? Is this a good time for us to break for lunch? That's hilarious. Even Judge Gull is like, do you know how long Cross is going to be? Despite the fact that this guy just talks forever? Mr. Rosie says, probably. I don't want to. I think the jury's kind of ready to move on. I mean, I am trying to get the hell out of here. Ms. Diener says, no, we discussed this witness would be, Mr. Rosie says, yeah, this would be, Ms. Diener said, somewhat rough. Court says, challenging? Ms. Diener says, yeah. Mr. Rosie says, you should have been at the depot. Uh-oh. They're talking about this dude in the sidebar about being troubling, problematic to question and to redirect his answers, and poor Mr. Rosie had to do the deposition, I am assuming. The court says, oh no, well, that's why I just wanted to assume we should break. Mr. Rosie says, this is a good spot. The court says, okay, that's fine. Ms. Diener says, sorry, I did my best. Sidebar conference concluded. Court says, all right, well, thank you, Mr. Rosie. Ladies and gentlemen, we're going to go ahead and take our lunch break. It's almost 12:30. While you're outside the courtroom, please keep your minds open. Please don't form any opinions or conclusions about anything. You may discuss the evidence that you've heard so far, but please only do so if you are all together in the room at the same time, and please don't deliberate. Gentlemen, the bailiff says, all rise. Court the jury leaves. The court says, all right, let's resume at 1:15. Jody, you can go off the record. Now we're back on. Court says, all right, we are back on the record. Mr. Rosie, are you ready with your cross? Mr. Rosie says, I am. Thank you. Court says, Ms. Diener, are you ready? Yes. Court says, all right, gentlemen. Bailiff says, all rise. And then he says, thank you. You may be seated. The court says, all right. Well, welcome back, ladies and gentlemen. We're ready to continue. Mr. Rosie says, thank you, Judge. Cross-examination of this witness is going to be even more painful than direct, I'm assuming. All right, so Mr. Rosie says, good afternoon, Dr. Martin. Good afternoon. Dr. Martin, you have no traditional bachelor's degree from an American university? No. And you obtained your medical degree in Mumbai? Is that correct? No, in Bengaluru. In Bangalore? I don't know, Bangalore? Bengaluru. Never heard of it. Let's find out where it is, shall we? I'm going to do a quick Google search here. Okay, so it is the Bangalore. It was formerly Bangalore, but now it is Bengaluru. It's located in the southeastern part of southern India of the state of Karnataka. I don't know, Karnataka. It serves as the state capital and sits at the plateau. I don't know. Anyways, it's in South India. That's where he got his medical degree. No bachelor's. So that's bizarre. And you had many different jobs. You did have many different jobs in Florida during the first 10, 20, 30 years of your career, right? Yes, sir. You have to speak up a little bit. Yes, that's right. Even if I'm standing right here. Yes, that's right. And those jobs involved you working for different counties, right? Like Broward County, Palm Beach County, Baker, yes, sir. And involved you working in different facilities in those counties, right? That's right. You were terminated from a job in Florida, were you not? Yeah. And you were involved in some lawsuit surrounded around individuals who were solitary confined when you were in Florida? No. You were testifying about that earlier when Ms. Diener was asking you, were you not? Yes or no? Could you repeat the question? The Osterbach case. Yes. Does that? Yeah, okay. A case that involved inmates in solitary confinement. Right. Yes or no? Yes, yes. And, Judge, may we have a sidebar? Sure. Ms. Diener says, Judge, this would not be the proper impeachment. That situation is separate from this case. Dr. Martin was not sued in that case. An employee of the DOC was something inaudible, addressed issues, honestly, kind of like IPASS. But as an employee or contact employee for the Federal Department of Corrections, it is not all a policy determined by Dr. Martin. So I don't know how it's an impeachable subject matter because it appears to be in the form of the question. Mr. Rosie says the state brought up the issue of solitary confinement during his direct exam. And he testified, says the court. And it's directly related to the fact that he is familiar with the industry as it relates to solitary confinement and the circumstances, even the legal side of it. And what does this lawsuit have to do with anything, says the court. Mr. Rosie says, well, I'm not asking him about the details. I'm just pointing out that he's been involved in this too. He testified that. So he's familiar with that. He has knowledge of the case. The court says, well, he testified to that. Yeah, that's it. That's all I'm asking. I'll move on. The court says, okay, sidebar over. The court says, move on, Mr. Rosie. Thank you. I took your deposition back in early October of this year. Is that correct? Yes, that's correct. Yes. And at that time, you acknowledged to me that it was very challenging to treat someone in solitary confinement, right? The patients, yes. And in 2022, when you were asked to go down to Westville, you were working at the state prison in Michigan City, is that right? Correct, yes. And you were asked to go to Westville because there was a significant backlog in cases at Westville. That's right. You told me somewhere between 200 and maybe 250 inmates that had backlog, that were part of the backlog, right? Yes or no? Yes, yes. Do you agree that the definition of serious mental illness involves someone with a major psychiatric disorder, which would include schizophrenia, major depression, bipolar disorder, all of these things? Correct. Judge, may I ask a preliminary question, says Ms. Diener. You may. Ms. Diener says, Dr. Martin, with regard to the DOC definition of serious mental illness in 2023 and 2022, are you familiar with the definition? Yes, Ms. Diener says the DOC definition? Not specifically, but in general, I agree that major diagnoses like schizo, Ms. Diener says, Dr. Martin, I don't want you to answer the question. No? Okay. Ms. Diener says, do you know the DOC definition for serious mental illness effective in 2022 and 2023 as we see it here today? No. I would object to the question. He's already admitted that's part of his definition. I think it's a weight issue. Overruled. Did you tell me that the DOC's definition of serious mental illness was someone with a psychiatric disorder, which would include schizophrenia, major depression, bipolar, all those kinds of things? That's right. Do you agree that solitary confinement of a human can be the cause for the onset of mental illness? It can cause that, yes. Do you agree that solitary confinement of a human being can exacerbate an existing mental illness? I agree. Do you agree that at times Dr. Allen's stay at Westville that he was in a state of psychosis? Yes, I agree. Do you agree that a human being in Mr. Allen's condition at Westville could move in and out of states of psychosis over time? It's possible. You said that you had personal contact with Mr. Allen at Westville. Is that true? That's true. And would you acknowledge that that you told me that contact occurred on 18 different occasions. Yes, roughly, right? Yes, roughly. Between November of 2022 and November of 2023. November of 2023? Correct. And the longest of those meetings was a half hour. I don't think that's right. 2022 is when he was arrested. And the longest of those meetings was a half an hour, which was your assessment when he got there in November, right? Yes, yeah, that's right. And there were two so he spent the total of 9 hours with him, maybe, at all, if that, during his time there. And there were two officers present with you during that meeting. Yes. There were other meetings with Mr. Allen that occurred at his cell door. Cell door? Yes. So you're talking to him through the glass, through the crack. Right, in the wall. Yes, yeah. And those meetings naturally would be much quicker than a half hour because, true, they're not going to stand there and talk through the door. True. So they're really not 30 minutes, but he might have, you know, written it down as 30 minutes, but he might have only stayed 2. And I went through and counted. I kind of was just roughly counting between, well, let me back up. Is it accurate to say that between January 25th, 2023 and April 13th, 2023 that you had no contact with Mr. Allen? That is true. And in fact, to the extent that he was suffering from any type of mental illnesses or mental health crisis, Dr. Wallace's notes would be a better source of information in that regard. For that period, yes. And you've acknowledged before that she's just in a better position to assess his overall mental health because she's the one that had the most contact with him. Depending. Okay. It depends. I'm asking you if, over the course of his stay at Westville, would you agree that she was in a better position to assess his mental health than any other doctors at that facility? Ms. Diener says, Judge, I'd object. Asked and answered. He already said she was in a better position to observe and assess. Miss Rosie says, he said it depends. Sustained. I'll move on. You can't get him to expand on his answer there. Do you agree that when you did see him at the door cell that it was typically just for a few minutes because that was enough contact for you? And that's right. Yes. Did you ever watch any in-cell videos of Mr. Allen? No. Did you ever watch any camcorder videos of Mr. Allen? No. Did you describe Mr. Allen on April 13th, 2023 as very psychotic at that time? Yes, I did. The same thing on May 13th, 2023? Ms. Diener says, objection, Judge. May 13th, does he have a record for May 13th? The court says, are you asking me? Ms. Diener says, no, I'm asking Mr. Rosie if there's one in the documents that Dr. Martin had an opportunity to review. Mr. Rosie says, I'm asking him a question. I'm not sure what the objection is. The court says that there's no record. That was the objection. I don't think I saw him that day. So sustained if there's no record. Did you tell me that on April 13th, you got a call and you were notified that he was being psychotic? Yes, April 13th. Yes. Okay, I apologize. You said you administered Halidol in 3 different forms. Is that right? No. Yes. I don't know how many yeses that is, but he said them a lot. You said there were 3 different kinds. There are 3 different kinds, and he was given 3 different, and all these different types. 4 of those. The lactate short-term administrations occurred in April, right? April 14th, 15th, 16th, and 17th. 5 of them. No, 14th, 15th, 16th, 17th. Okay, so 4 days. And then you gave him a 30-day shot on or about April 18th. And then another on or about May 18th. Yeah, okay. And then another one on or about June 15th. 16th, I think. And you only administer antipsychotics to somebody who is psychotic, right? Yes. Let me take that back. There's no question. Do you agree that Mr. Allen suffered from major depressive disorder? Yes, he did. Do you agree, or is it accurate that there are circumstances that people like Mr. Allen deal with in prison that can exacerbate those symptoms? Yes, I agree. And one of those would be circumstances being, I should say, one of those would be being separated from outside family members. I agree. And one of those would be someone believing that they're being unfairly incarcerated or held. I agree. And one of those might be treatment from other inmates. The way the others were dealing with him, yes, yeah. Mr. Allen complained of those things from time to time. Yes, 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 yeah. There was some reference in your notes that you questioned Mr. Allen's behaviors and the timing of his meeting with his lawyers. Do you recognize that general comment? Could you repeat the question? Objection, Judge. It's outside direct. Sustained. Did you report in any of your records that you were concerned about Mr. Allen having a meeting with his lawyers? Yes, I did. And you don't have any idea what his lawyers talked to him about during that meeting, do you? No, no, no. Why would he be concerned about what he was talking about with his lawyers? You don't have any idea what his lawyers talked about during that meeting. No, no, no. So anything that any opinion you would generate in that regard would be pure speculation? Pure speculation, I agree. Oops, what did I just do? Where was I? Pure speculation, I agree. You did report that he was engaging in paranoia because he thought that his lawyers were cops at one point, yes or no? That is what he reported to Dr. Walla, which she told me about, that he thought that one of his lawyers was a good cop and the other one is a bad cop. So he was paranoid about them because he didn't feel that they were, working in his best interest. Ms. Diener says, Judge, I would object at this point that the response calls for hearsay. Sustained. Rick Allen's weight loss was significant to you? Yes. 50 pounds over the time that he was there. Yeah, 45. And you said that's not normal, is it? That is not normal. People tend to actually gain weight in those circumstances, usually. You've never treated a pretrial detainee. Ms. Diener says, objection to the form of the question, Judge. He's inserting his own opinion and he's never treated he's never treated someone in a particular circumstance. I think that would have to come from the witness. I'll rephrase, says Mr. Rosie. Sustained. Thank you. Have you ever treated a pretrial detainee without a criminal history in a prison in your entire professional career? In prison? Yeah. Or in jail? In prison. If you don't know the difference, jail is county jail. That's where you're held until you get bail and, your crime's light. You get to go home. You got into a bar fight, whatever. You're held overnight. You get to go home. Prison, that's where the baddies go. That's where all the bad guys go. That's where the criminals go. County is for people who have not had their trials yet. That's the big difference. So a prison setting is he's with all convicted felons. He's the only pretrial detainee in that situation. In prison, yes. Okay, do you recall me asking you questions of this nature back on October 4th? Yes. Give me 1 second. Would it help to review your transcript to refresh your recollection of that conversation? I don't mind looking at it, but I can answer without looking at it too. Judge, may I approach? Ms. Diener says, Judge, I'm going to object to the question as not being relevant to Mr. Allen and his situation. The court says, how is it relevant? Mr. Rosie says, it's relevant because it has a tendency to prove that Mr. Allen's treatment was unlike any inmate that he has ever dealt with over the course of his 30 years. The court says that's not what he testified to. He said, yes, he has treated pretrial detainees. That's not, I was going to impeach him with his statement. That's not what he told me in October. Oh, so this is for impeachment purposes. Thank you. May I? Court says, okay. Handing you a copy of your deposition from October 2nd, 2024. Okay. Will you take a look at that, Dr. Martin? Specifically, page 55, lines 17 through 23. Just read those. You don't have to comment. Just read them and let me know when you've read those. Read that question or read that text, and then I'll ask you to read on page 56, line 6 through 22. I'm just asking you to read those. Just let me know when you've read them. Yeah, I read them. I read the two-part question. You've never treated a pre-detainee without a criminal history at Westville, have you, up until Mr. Allen? Ms. Diener says, Judge, I'm going to object. The first question was in a prison setting, and now he's saying in WCU. Sustained. Okay, we'll do it backwards. And Judge, I'd like to renew my objection. I still would question the relevance of this line of questioning because Mr. Allen is in safekeeping pursuant to court order, and so none of these witnesses have any say about what his status is in that regard, and so their opinion as to whether it's fair or unfair is really irrelevant to this case. But it's still a factor. You can't take it out just because it's inconvenient for your case. You can't just say, oh, well, he was only in safekeeping, not solitary, so that's the big difference. You can't do that. He still is going to be treated, or it's going to still affect him as if he's in solitary confinement, because that is really what it is. Mr. Rosie says, Judge, I think the information that's been extracted from the witness's testimony is that solitary confinement is damaging to someone's brain, and Mr. Allen was in a situation that no other inmate at that facility has ever been in. I think the court says, then let's limit it to Mr. Allen, shall we? Sustained. Okay. Was Mr. Allen's situation unique to you in terms of his detention? Relatively speaking, yes, it was unique compared to other inmates at Westville. May I have that? Earlier, thank you for that, you testified that you were working from both an office at ISP at the state prison in Michigan City and at Westville at times, right? With regard to the inmates who were at Westville, with regard to the inmates who were at Westville, I think that's how it should have been said. Yes, yes. And so you were actually conducting business, if you will, from a computer at ISP, but dealing with inmates at Westville, correct? Correct. And part of that was you authorizing the administration of meds despite the fact that you weren't on site with the patients at the time. Is that, Ms. Diener says, objection, Judge. That's a lot of testimony in that question. And again, I would ask the testimony come from the witness. I understand it's cross, but it's excessive. Sustained. Were you administering meds from a desk at Michigan City to inmates at Westville? Yes, on one occasion I think I did. So he's doing it virtually. Yeah, sure, just give them their meds. I don't have to see them. You mentioned earlier that Mr. Allen was identified as a safekeeper, right? Yes. And your job. You had a particular job because of that business designation, correct? Yes. Are you aware of any specific reason why he was identified as a safekeeper? To the best of my knowledge, he was not. Judge, may I ask a preliminary question? Yes, you may. Ms. Diener says, Dr. Martin, are you involved in the classification of inmates and whether they're placed in safekeeping or not? No, certainly not. I would object to the question. Mr. Rosie says, Judge, earlier he rendered an opinion in his testimony that he was under the assumption that Mr. Allen was there was a threat to safety, and so I'm just asking what his facts are to support that opinion. That's not the question that you asked, said the court. May I ask a different question? Yes, but I would sustain. The facts are you aware of that Mr. Allen was a threat to his own safety before he was taken to Westville? I was not aware of him being a threat to himself. What facts are you aware of that somebody else was a threat to Mr. Allen's safety before he was taken to Westville? I was not aware of someone being a threat to him, but in general, somebody thought that he was potentially in danger. Objection, Judge. Speculation. Sustained. I'll move on. When you met with Mr. Allen in November of 2022, he did not have lawyers, did he? He did not have lawyers assigned. I don't know. Did you ask? No. Your initial meeting with Richard Allen, is it true? No, strike that. Is it true in November of 2022 when you met with him that you conducted an interview? That's right. It wasn't a formal psychiatric assessment, was it? What date? In November of 2022. No, yes. And so any background information that you would have gathered from him basically was during that particular session, right? No. Did you gather background information? I got some background information before I met him. Okay. Through that was available in the chart. Okay. So it was in the electronic chart, so I had access to information based on his interactions with people at the reception center before he got transferred to Westville. Okay. In your November 22nd, in your November 29th, 2022 medication and or psychotherapy report, did you report that Mr. Allen had used alcohol socially? Can I look at my chart? Would it help refresh your memory? Yes. Let me just open it up for you, directing your attention to 1129 of 2022 report, specifically the second page at the bottom, the fourth to the last line. Do you see that? Yes, yes. Is that what he reported to you? Yes. Thank you. Earlier, you testified that, and correct me if I'm wrong, that there was a difference between being solitary confined and being in a one man cell, right? Physically, it's the same. Okay. To the point I was trying to make was that solitary confinement has a punitive connotation, even though you're using the same cell, and Mr. Allen had not done anything wrong while he was in prison. Which would be even more confusing for somebody to be solitary confined if they hadn't done something wrong, correct? I agree. I agree. Okay, all right. And you said earlier, strike that, you testified earlier that you were trying to do whatever you could to make him more comfortable. Is that what you said? Yes, yes. You acknowledged that the circumstances in which he was enduring would have been extremely uncomfortable. I would not use extremely. Okay, it was uncomfortable? Okay. And so you were just trying to make him less uncomfortable? We were trying to, the whole team, the whole prison system, starting from the warden, everyone who was involved, we were trying to make sure that he has more. Warden Gallipo? Warden Gallipo. All right. He was making sure Rick Allen was comfortable. Mr. Gallipo, Mr. Dwanger, Dr. Walla, the assistant warden, Elise Gallagher, I think the lawyer for the Department of Corrections, we were having frequent meetings to see how he could be made more comfortable in the situation, given the situation in which he was in. But these are your MTD team meetings. Yes, yes, yeah. But some of these psychiatrists, did you mention Mays earlier? I think is one of them. Dr. Mays was the regional psychiatrist at that time for the region. Bonner or something, I think you said. Dr. Stephen Bonner was one of the psychiatrists in another facility. Were you ever present when Dr. Mays interacted with Rick Allen personally? No. Were you ever present when Dr. Bonner or Mr. Bonner interacted with Rick Allen personally? No. Dr. Bonner. Were they? No, they did not. No. Were those people even on site at Westville? No, they were not on site. Now, you testified earlier that because Mr. Allen was a safekeeper, that your job was just to keep him alive, right? Well, is that what you said? Not my job. It was the job of the institution of the Department of Corrections. That's why he had been entrusted to the care of the Department of Corrections. That was the standard? Because he was not, that was my understanding, that he was not safe in the county jail wherever he was, and so they had transferred him to the department, care of the custody of the Department of Corrections, and they designated him to be housed at Westville. Keep him alive? Yeah, I guess, yes. Now, earlier you testified from your medication management notes on June 20th, 2023, that Mr. Allen was oriented to person, place, time, coherent, lucid, those kinds of things. Can I look at my notes? You may, yeah. Yeah, June 20th, yes. June 20th. Yes, 2023. Yes. That's what your testimony was, right? Yes, he was, or that's the day that you reported that he told you that he wanted to apologize to the families? Yes. Doctor, earlier in this trial, there was admitted into evidence Exhibit DDD, a video from the Indiana Department of Corrections, Westville, on June 20th, 2023, at 10:52 a.m. I'd like to play that video for you, and then I have a few questions for you, okay? June 20th? Okay. June 20th, 2023, at 10:52. Mr. Rosie says, may I turn the TV screen, Your Honor, and publish it to the witness? Says the court. Yeah, so he can see the video. Yeah, go ahead, says the court. Mr. Rosie, Ms. Diener says, Mr. Rosie, yes? Can I see the exhibit and verify that it is from that date? Mr. Rosie says, yeah, sure. Here's the BBB, that's the master list. It's the last page. And which one are you going to? June 20th, 2023. Can we have just a moment, Judge? Yeah. Mr. Rosie, is this the court's copy? Yes. Okay, thank you, Judge. May I publish, Judge? Yes, you may. Specifically 12:30 to 2100 on the video. Are we going to play the whole 20 minutes? No. I just said 12:30 to 2100. Okay, thanks. Yeah. I'm sorry, I thought you said 10:52. Well, that was the reference to the video on the master list, is that it started at 10:52. I'm going to play 12:30 to 12 minutes and 30 seconds. Was that published to the jury? Mr. Rosie says, to 21 minutes. Court says, had that been published to the jury? Yeah, the whole thing was. We showed the whole thing. Mr. McLeland says, well, did you show the whole video on that one, or is this the one you skipped through? Ms. Diener says, Mr. Rosie, the court says, that was the one that was skipped through, according to Jody's notes. I'm sorry? The court says, that's the one you skipped through, according to Jody's notes. May I publish the 12:30 to 21 minutes? It's been admitted. The court says, well, I understand that, but it's fine, but this may or may not have been published to the jury previously, or you don't know. Mr. Rosie says, well, I know the video is in various parts that it was. We did speed up the few occasions just so we could move through it. The court says, and could you please clear your screen of all the extraneous information on the bottom? You see the screen, Dr. Martin? Defendant's Exhibit DDD is published in part. Ms. Diener says, Judge, is there a limit on how much of this we're going to show? I think there's been enough for the witness to see Mr. Allen's behavior. Mr. Rosie says, Judge, I asked, Ms. Diener says, and this has been shown to the jury already. Mr. Rosie says, I asked to publish up to 21 minutes. I think 8 minutes is a reasonable time. It's a long video. I think that's a fair representation of his circumstances. So I can question Mr. Martin. Dr. Martin, thank you. I'm sorry. The court says, would counsel approach, please? Could you stop that? She doesn't want them arguing in front of the jury. So we're going to have a sidebar. What's he looking for? Says the court. There's only 32 seconds left, says Mr. Rosie. I think we're done, says Ms. Diener. Sidebar over. Having been told that the video was from June 30th of 2023, was that the same Richard Allen that you said was oriented to person, place, time of day, and situation? Yes. I have no further questions. Ms. Diener, says the court. So whatever was on that video, he must not have looked lucid or oriented to person, place, time of day, and situation, and all the other things that he's supposed to be oriented to. So seems like there might have been a little fib told by this expert witness, perhaps, and your own eyes can see that he's been lying to you. All right, so redirect of Dr. John Martin by Ms. Diener. She asks, Doctor, the interactions that you had with Mr. Allen, either at his cell or in the medical room, may or may not have been recorded. Is that correct? I beg your pardon? The interactions you would have with Mr. Allen at his cell, would those be recorded? Did staff follow you there and record your conversation? Can I have a look at my chart, my notes? Sure, take your time. Okay, okay. So, can I have it? So, where did your conversation with him occur on June 20th? It was an interview cell outside his housing. Okay, and so would that indicate to you that you spent a little more or less time with him than if you were at his door? More time. On that day, did he communicate with you? Yes, he did. And would he need to communicate with you in order for you to have an opinion that he was oriented to person, place, time of day, and situation? Yes. So, would that involve you asking him questions and him providing responses? Yes. And so, on that particular day, you document that you made a statement to you made a statement to you. He made it. Oh my God, I can't read. And so, on that particular day, you document that he made a statement to you about wanting to apologize to families of his victims. Correct? Yes. Yes. Did you ask him? No. That statement? No. That was spontaneous on his part. It was, on his own volition. Okay. When you meet with him in an interview cell, who else is there with you? In an interview, usually there are one or two officers. Do you know if this particular interaction between you and he was recorded on this day? If you know, it's okay if you don't. I don't remember. All I remember is that whenever he was moved from his cell or taken out of his cell, there was a videotape. He was being recorded. Such a violation of rights. Okay, and so he might have been recorded moving, being brought from his cell to to the room where medical doctors and nurse practitioners do the assessments and where I would do my assessments. Okay. So would that be similar to when he would go for his vitals check? Would they do it in the room that you're referring to? Not necessarily. They might do it just near his cell. But if we're doing it out of cell, because is it no? Because it is a laborious. I mean, it's a time-consuming process involving officers, etc., to move him and then move him back. Okay. So sometimes they might do it just cell side, get him out of the cell, get his vitals, and put him back. Okay. So let's talk about June 30th through the 2023, June 30th, 20th, the 20th of June of 2023. I can't talk right now. My brain shuts off at a certain time, but yet it keeps going. You indicate on here that he was interviewed in an interview cell. Right. And it also makes reference that he was going to meet with Dr. Walla in a few minutes. Correct. So would that indicate to you that he had already been moved either for you or for Dr. Walla? Yes. Okay. And so was your interaction with him very different from the interaction you saw in the video? Yes. Yeah. And you can't explain why this is different, correct? I mean, you don't know why he's acting different there, do you? You don't want me to speculate. No. Mr. Rosie says, I'm going to object to the form of the question. Can you, I'll rephrase. This is rephrase, says the court. Mr. Rosie says, redirect. Ms. Diener says, I'll rephrase. The court says, thank you. So, do you have any explanation for why his behavior in that video shown to you would be different from his behavior when you met with him? You want me to speculate on that? No, I don't want you to speculate. Do you have any explanation? No explanation. Does seeing it make you believe that your observations were incorrect on June 30th? No. Does it make you question your own record about what he said to you on June 30th? No. At the time when you met with him? Not at all. Not at all. When you first met with, you were asked by Mr. Rosie if when you first met with Richard Allen, did he have existing depression and anxiety, correct? Yes. Okay, and so would that be considered a baseline condition for Mr. Allen when I saw him? Just like in general, yeah, when I saw him, that I considered that as the baseline as far as I was concerned. Okay, and so you're treating him. At one point, then, you see the need for medication for psychosis, correct? Correct. And then you discontinue medication. Does Mr. Allen return to his baseline while in your care? Yes, as of the 20th of as of the 2nd of May. Okay, May of 2023? Yeah, May 2nd of 2023, as far as his psychosis was concerned, and as far as the depression was concerned, he was back in baseline. You indicated that he was no longer psychotic on May 2nd, 2023, yet his medication for Halidol continued. Can you explain why? Okay, so the reason why, okay, so brief answer. Yes, so I want to make sure that there isn't a recurrence because illnesses have exacerbations and remissions, okay? So I want to make sure that there wasn't any of that happening. And so I kept observing him, and for 7 weeks, there was no evidence of psychosis. After you started the Halidol and you were visiting with him with the frequency that you've already testified to, were you ever contacted by staff that he was in a psychotic state that needed your immediate attention? Objection calls for hearsay. Ms. Diener says, no, I said, was he ever contacted? Sustained. That is hearsay. Ms. Diener says, okay. Mr. Rosie says, thank you. Did you ever need to come to the facility to see Mr. Allen like you did on April 13th of 2023? No. No other questions, Judge. Mr. Rosie, says the court, and we've got some recross here by Mr. Rosie. You said that you talked to him on June 20th. He was spontaneous. He communicated to you spontaneously, right? June 20th, yes. Did you see anything in that video that suggested that he was able to communicate spontaneously? Did you see anything in the video that he could? Yeah. There's nothing there that he couldn't. Did you see anything that suggested he could? Objection, Judge. Asked and answered. No, says the witness. Sustained. Does the video make you question your assessment that Mr. Allen was no longer in a state of psychosis on June 20th, 2023? Yes. Does it make you question your assessment that Mr. Allen was free of his psychosis on the 20th? Because they played a whatever it was to show him. We don't know what it was, but obviously Richard Allen was not in a condition where it seemed like he would be coherent and giving, a coherent type of confession like he gave Dr. Walla supposedly when he was in a state of psychosis and couldn't put two thoughts together to make a sentence. But yet we're supposed to believe all of this. Mr. Rosie says, I have nothing further. The court says, does anybody on the jury have any questions for Dr. Martin? Thank you. Would counsel approach? So we've got some questions here. So during the sidebar, the court says, did the oral Halidol continue to be part of Mr. Allen's medications after June 20th, 2023? Mr. Rosie says, she said oral? Ms. Diener said oral. The question was oral, says Rosie. Says Diener. Oral, says the court. Continue to be part of. Mr. Rosie says, I don't think he ever said he administered oral. He did, says Ms. Diener, other than the first day. It's in the record, says Ms. Diener. Okay, that's fine. I just wondered if it's consistent with his testimony. Court says, yeah. Ms. Rosie said, okay. Court says he did. He said he did. Rosie says, okay. Court says, what time did you meet with Mr. Allen on June 20th, 2023? That's fine. Based on the video, says the court, you saw from June 20th, 2023, would his presentation be consistent with feigning? Good question, says Ms. Diener. Good question there, says Mr. Rosie. The court says, is it possible for Mr. Allen to slip in and out of psychosis in a 24-hour period? That's fine, says Ms. Diener. Court says, so when we're done with him, are you done with your rebuttal or do you have Sir rebuttal? Mr. Rosie says, I doubt it, but if I could just check. The court says, okay. Mr. Rosie says that I do or don't, but I don't think so. Sidebar over. Now this is in front of the jury. The court reads, Doctor, did the oral Halidol continue to be part of Mr. Allen's medications after June 30th, 2023? I'd have to take a look at my notes. He would need to look at his notes. Ms. Diener says, do you want to see your medication record? He says, yeah. Ms. Diener says, I'll get it. He says, Your Honor, from what date to what date? Did the oral Halidol continue to be part of his medications after June 20th, 2023? Answer, yes. Any follow-up, Mr. Rosie says he said yes? Yes. Court says he said yes. Mr. Rosie says thank you. Court says Ms. Diener, no question. The court says Mr. Rosie, no questions. Next, what time did you meet with Mr. Allen on June 20th, 2023? I don't remember. It was early in the morning. Early in the morning. Yeah, okay. So I usually go there somewhere around 6, maybe around that time, 6:37, and I see people that I'm supposed to see in that building before I start seeing people on the compound because the people in the compound have gone for breakfast and it takes some time for them to start coming out from different dorms. Court says, okay, Ms. Diener, no other question. Mr. Rosie, no questions. Based on the video you saw yesterday referring to the June 20th, 2023, could this presentation be consistent with feigning? No, I don't think so. Okay. Ms. Diener. She has a follow-up. She says, was there anything about his behavior that would be indicative of psychosis? No, thank you, that's all. The court says, Mr. Rosie. I have no questions. Sorry. Next question is it possible for Mr. Allen to slip in and out of psychosis in a 24-hour period? Answer, yes. Okay, Ms. Diener, no question. Mr. Rosie, no questions. All right, thank you, doctor. You may step down. The witness says, thank you. The court says, and I'll take those. I think these are the exhibits. Are they not? Yes, if I could have those. Okay, Mr. McLeland. Mr. McLeland says, Judge, the state of Indiana has no other rebuttal witnesses. State of Indiana rests. So they have some flawed science of a bullet casing that was cycled, but the only way that they could prove that it was Richard Allen's was by firing the bullet casing, which the bullet casing from the crime scene is not fired, it is unspent. So apples to oranges comparisons and flawed science that at best is like the best evidence we have against him. And then these horrible, 70 confessions or however many there are, or supposed confessions, when he's been in and out of psychosis for this whole time and been given this Halidol involuntarily against his will. So I'm not seeing the guilt. If I was a jury member on this, I obviously would not be able to convict him. How they got 12 people or however many, was it 12? I think it was a jury of 12. How they got 12 people to all say guilty is mind-boggling to me on the evidence in this case. So Mr. Rosie, the court says, the defense has no sir rebuttal, thank you, so the defense rests. Well, ladies and gentlemen, you've now heard all the evidence in this case. As I've told you some weeks ago, the next step in the proceeding is argument and instruction, after which you will retire to deliberate. The attorneys and I have a couple of housekeeping matters that we need to attend to, and I'd like to give them the opportunity to have some time to get prepared for final arguments, so we're going to call it a day. While you are on your own business now for the rest of the afternoon and into the evening, please remember that I told you what I told you about not talking with family or not talking about the case amongst yourselves or with anyone else, since you will be under the supervision of the bailiffs. Have a safe and peaceful afternoon and evening, and we'll see you tomorrow morning for final argument. Gentlemen, the bailiff says, all rise. The jury is out. The court says you may be seated. I did receive, Mr. Rosie, your proposed jury instruction. It looks like you also sent that to the state. Have you had the opportunity to review the proposed jury instruction? Yes, Judge, I have. I don't know how much farther they go into this. I'm going to wait on this conversation because they're going to do jury arguments and stuff. Hold on, let me see where I'm supposed to stop. I think this is where I'm stopping. Yes, closing verdict. So the next episode, just so you know, we are almost done. The next episode is going to be the closing verdicts and sentencing all in one. It's going to be probably a little bit longer to get it all in, but we're going to get it all in. So that's what we have coming up, and then that will be the conclusion of the Delphi case. So what do you guys think? Guilty? Not guilty? Did the state even prove its case? Let me know in the comments below, and I will see you guys in the next one. Thank you so much for watching with me. Take care. Bye, guys. That's the end of this Trial Transcripts Exposed. Thanks for following along with me. Like if you want more, subscribe, and let me know what you think in the comments below. See you next time.